Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Caribbean MSME Solutions Forum 2026, we welcome and thank our panelists for agreeing to participate as presenter in our Wellbeing Healthcare Enterprise Innovation and Opportunities session this afternoon. Our panelists are distinguished Tricia Larmon, Dr. Donald Moore, Mr. Eric Walcott, and Cynthia Blake. It is my pleasure to moderate this session. Having worked in healthcare for over 2 decades, that's my little passion. 14 in global pharmaceuticals with GlaxoSmithKline Pharmaceuticals, and over 6 years managing some healthcare clinics and in medical clinics located throughout Broward and Palm Beach counties in South Florida. This session will explore how Caribbean-owned MSMEs are responding to emerging health challenges while creating innovative solutions and sustainable enterprises. We're honored to have you all share your experience, your organization's work, emerging opportunities that you may see in the sector, and your vision for strengthening health and well-being across the Caribbean area. So I'd like to jump right in and start off with Tricia Larmon asking the question, tell us about your business or practice.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. So I am the founder and CEO of Sarnova Technologies. We are a behavioral intelligence and well-being technology company. And so we just build platforms that are designed to help people recognize and understand and respond to rising stress before it becomes burnout. That is also with emotional overload, reduced stress, and really figuring out how to activate the parasympathetic system so we can decrease the cortisol and improve technology and the quality of life with anyone who interacts with it.
I'm smiling because of those big words. So if we have an audience that are so-called non-technical in healthcare, so let's simplify them somewhat as we continue with our discussion because we want it to benefit everyone who is on, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Dr. Moore, can we go to you? Tell us about your business or practice.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And, I come from the perspective that everyone is knowledgeable on healthcare because we're all experts in our own physical
Right.
space. So my business was Dr. Moore and Associates. Dr. Moore and Associates, a primary care independent practice in Brooklyn. We started out as a solo practitioner, and I ended up as a solo practitioner at the peak of my practice. I had two other physicians, hence the associates. Um, this primary care was located in Brooklyn, and Brooklyn is the heart of the heart of the world, as you know. Manhattan thinks they are the center of the world, but Brooklyn is the heart of the world. Everybody passed through or come to Brooklyn at some point. There's nobody in this world that don't know anything about Brooklyn. Anyway, for 35 years, we provided direct care. And it was more than that. I was a pharmaceutical consultant, a researcher, a
Okay.
health equity advocate. Um, I got involved with independent practice business development. Basically, I was mentoring other business startups. And, we really became experts in our revenue cycle. As we went towards the end of that clinical practice, I moved primarily which is where I am now, to education. So I teach at college. I am a professor in biology. I teach in the School of Health Professions at my alma mater. I mentor, basically, which I think is a very important part of what I do. And I'm involved with curriculum development at the university. On the other side, I'm a medical and public health consultant. I consult in chronic disease management, pandemic preparedness. As a matter of fact, I did a fair amount of work during the last pandemic we had. I thought I would only have had one. I thought the AIDS pandemic, which was when I started, that was the pandemic that was there then. I thought one was enough, but just as I was getting ready to, fold up the shingles, and we got another pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right,
So
right.
healthcare financing was also something that I've been doing over the years. I wrote my thesis on the healthcare system in Cuba. Basically, it was how healthcare systems are financed. I'm still involved with healthcare financing through various organizations, and basically health delivery, service planning and implementation. So my niche area is house calls. I claim, and no one has disputed it yet, to have made more house calls than any other physician in the United
Oh,
States.
wow.
In 2000, I had already made 10,000 house calls, and
Mm,
I continued that for the next 10, 15 years, not 15 years, 2002, next 20 years to make another 10,000 house calls. So I think I'm up to about 20,000 house calls, mostly in Brooklyn, in Manhattan. And basically, my other niche area is the electronic health records. I was one of the first physicians and one of the first practice in America to attest to meaningful use. That was the use of the electronic health record. And
mhm.
hence today we have AI, and I am the chair of the AI task force and the HIT committee for the Medical Society of the State of New York.
So
So
it
as you can
means that you
see, I
have
am a
a
busy guy.
mouthful of
I'm a
stuff.
busy
And
guy. And
one of the parts of that question is what is the difference, that different approach that you use? And I'm assuming that it is the house calls. Remember that you can't claim house calls because house call was from tradition, right?
right. Well, I
I
claim
know,
the
but you claim
volume
it
of
now.
house calls. And if I may tell you one little story. So when I was growing up in medicine, there was a very well-known doctor in Brooklyn. His name was Dr. Gerald Dees, and he recently passed. And if you mention the word Dr. Dees, they would say, Dr. Dees make house calls. And I just
Ah,
thought that was so cool. And I said, well, one day I am going to surpass the amount of house calls that
right,
Dr. Dees
right,
made. And I
right,
did.
right,
So
right,
that's
right.
one of my niche.
Right.
Anyway, I'll shut
I
up
love
and
the
let
I no no I love the stories, because the stories makes my claim that hey, you can claim house calls because it's traditional, but then yes, you said the volume. And I could get into something else with you on that. But I'll just jump to question two with Trisha. What specific problems were you trying to solve when you launched your business?
So the problem that I saw was that most like the health and well-being community, the support was basically exhausted. There was burnout. And that was from an emotional overwhelm. People were disengaged or experiencing pretty much performance decline. Kind of like Dr. Moore said, with the pandemic afterwards, stress was not reducing. And with that, I wanted to address the gap between I'm fine and I'm overwhelmed.
Yes,
So
yes,
for
yes.
me, that specific problem was stress. And it doesn't appear out of nowhere. So there are often patterns before it with the poor sleep, repeated high demand periods. And that is what we wanted to address. And figuring that out, how to turn that insight into something practical, is where we went ahead and developed a piece of software called Syncia. And what that does, it uses our special behavioral algorithm to say, hey, you are stressed and you're getting a little bit more stress. How can we mitigate that in real time and tell you this is what you need to do?
Hmm.
This is how you need to bring down that cortisol in real time. I'm in my doctorate right now for
Mm,
mind body medicine.
right.
And so, with that, I've coupled these practices to say, not only can we mitigate stress, help you with stress, but we want to improve your stress in a way that you can take from our technology and combat stress in the future without us. You can just start to bake these type of interventions into your daily practices, and then you can share them with your loved ones, because quality of life is important to us, and everybody's using technology, everybody's using AI. So we still
Hmm.
wanted to give a human touch to say, listen, The problem right now is not only are people stressed out, they have
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, but they are so focused on technology. They're so
Mm-hmm.
focused on the quicker way of doing things with AI. How can we step back and implement more of a human touch to say, hey, where we started and where we still want to end is with the human connection. And that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of what's missing to help people through that difficult time. So that's what we're doing here at Starnova Technologies.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'll go with Dr. Moore. Can you share with us question two, which is what specific problem were you trying to solve, if you haven't said it already?
Well, may I just start out by drawing attention to Trisha's speakers behind her? That was one of my first business. We used to make speakers, boombox, the ones that would be taller than I am, and I'm 6'2". So, with the Jamaican background,
Yes,
anyway, we had a whole lot of wood one day, and somebody said, let's make speakers with them, and we made the wood. What problem was I trying to solve? I wasn't trying to solve a problem. I was called to medicine.
yes,
And instead of ending up in a big system, which is where most doctors practice now, I felt that I wanted to get back to the community. And when things didn't work out with my employers, I decided that I was going to go into my own practice. And fortunately, in a profession like medicine, at least back then, it was not hard to start up.
right,
What
right.
really got solved with me being an entrepreneur, a business owner, was I became an employer. And as an
Mm-hmm.
employer, I was able to hire people. So I am the first M in that acronym there. I'm the micro guy. Anyway, but micro businesses do employ people, 5, 10 people. Uh,
Right, right, right,
and not only, and you give people who may not have had opportunities in the larger businesses, you give them startups. And there are many really very smart people out there that can be employed, that can help your business. So that we solved a lot of problems, but I think that was probably one of the most impactful things. The fact that I was there in the community, the people knew me, and they didn't have to go elsewhere. A lot of patients came to me because I was Jamaican. They came to me because
right,
they were
right, right,
Trinidadian or they
right.
were
Caribbean.
Grenada and they wanted. So it wasn't just being a black doctor, it was being a black
Yes,
Caribbean doctor,
yes,
and that connection was there. So a lot of problems got solved being an entrepreneur.
nice. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I wanted to also welcome Cynthia Blake and also Eric Walcott. And I'm going to ask Cynthia Blake if she could answer quickly. We're on question two, which says, what specific problem were you trying to solve when you launched your business? But as we go into that, I'll ask you also to share what business are you involved in? What inspired you to
Sure.
start?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Shelley, for
Will
having me on.
you turn your camera on?
You know what? I am trying and it is not, I'm having some technical
It's okay.
difficulties over here.
Go ahead and speak.
But no, I appreciate the opportunity. I am the proud owner of Kind Culture LLC, where kindness is a culture. My passion is in herbalism and flower essences. So my company is built off of that. I do a lot of consultations about how to help people in a more holistic way. People that are looking to come away from the medicines. So I go to Mother Earth. My specific problem that I was trying to solve was for my family. My daughter is 24. She's a type 1 diabetic. And when we found out just a few years ago, um, my family are diabetics, and a lot of people have transitioned from diabetes. I wanted to figure out if there was a more holistic way to help her. And so I got into herbs, and I really think that I was called spiritually to that methodology, and so or that method. The other part was my younger children had terrible skin, And I wanted to, again, go to the herb and to the flowers to find out if there were ways for me to help them without having to go to the doctor. So I came into herbalism. I started making body butters and oils, tinctures, just all of the things that I thought might help. Now, just to note, my daughter is on insulin, right? Like, so she still has that element, that medical element, but we are still kind of incorporating the herbs to help her.
Definitely got
So
that.
that's
Thank
where
you.
my company comes from.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'll go with
My
Eric.
pleasure.
Eric? Eric, are you there? So we'll just jump right into question 3, and I will go back to Trisha. How is your business making a measurable difference in the lives of people you serve?
Right now we have been able to help about 3 young adults manage their stress. One who was on anxiety medication, we've helped wean them off with mind body medicine practices, mindfulness. We currently are entering a pilot phase with a company in London to help staff with managing their stress daily. And I'm also trying to work with someone out in Jamaica, since I am Jamaican, who has a in-home uh, care program for adults, and trying to figure out how to get the software over there to help her and her staff with being, a little bit less stressed, and overall trying to infiltrate businesses where I can say, listen, you don't need to take all of these conventional things to help you with your stress. We can do it in a more natural and holistic way. So that is the measurable difference that we are making. We get a lot of letters, a lot of outreach, and there's a lot of industries that want to partner with us that are really intrigued to say, hey, can you bring this to a nursing home? Can you bring this software into
Okay.
sports? So that is really heartwarming and fulfilling to see that there are those type of industries that want to partner with us as we try to battle and really tackle stress.
Okay. I was going to push you a little bit further to look
Please
at
do. Please
the
do.
examples. I know you mentioned some that you're working with and the success that you've had there, but is there
Mhm.
any way that you could share your approach? Just one
Absolutely.
example
Yes,
of quality of
absolutely.
care and what the outcomes are without
Yes.
any gain any privacy.
No, no. So for example, right now there's a practice that does art therapy with children. And what we do is I go in and we take a biofeedback device. Right now we have a Fitbit, and we get the baseline heart rate, your skin respiration measurements like that off the Fitbit device. And then again, there's the algorithm. And my background, I have a graduate certification in applied behavioral analysis.
Okay.
So as with the BCBA, we can treat those with autism or behavioral issues by mitigating and looking at data before what happens, then their behavior patterns. So the same concept. Once
Okay.
I'm able to get a baseline of that data, I can say, okay, for some reason, whenever it comes to, for example, going outside near this area at 12, your heart rate is increasing, or there's a change in behavior. I'm not sure what that is, but your body is responding to that. That's where we're able to say, hey, listen, every time at this time when you do this activity, we notice this spike, or we notice that there's more stress being put on the body. Before that happens, we want you to try, for example, box breathing, or other methods that are proven to help decrease the stress. Over time, once these are more consistent and the individual is used to doing them, the body, instead of response in stress, is able to respond in a way that can mitigate that stress by keeping that stress level down. And that is how we are starting to infiltrate different areas. And just one example of how we're able to make our technology work.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Dr. Moore, how is
Yes.
your business making a measurable difference in the lives of people you serve? I know you've mentioned a couple of stuff, but is there anything that you want to share right now?
Sure, I'm going to share. Trisha, what's box breathing?
So, box breathing is when you breathe in and you want to hold your breath for 4 seconds. Then, after that, you want to exhale through the mouth for 6 seconds slowly. Then, you want to repeat that in through the nose, hold for 4 seconds, and then out through the mouth slowly for 6 seconds. Box breathing has been used by the Navy SEALs for one example to really control their stress level and keep the heart rate at a pretty decent rate in high stress areas.
Great. I used to do that when I started exercising, but now that you tell me it's going to reduce some of my stress, I'm going to certainly get back to that. So,
Please, yes.
thank you for that. So, how have I impacted? So I told you at least, in terms of employment, that's certainly one area. And it's sort of obvious if I were treating patients, over the thousands and thousands of my patients told me while I was practicing how important it was for me to be there. But, even when one leaves that clinical setting and now I'm in education, I'll tell you a story of two students.
Hmm.
I teach a class, human disease and disorders, at the college undergraduate level, and one of my these students are very competitive. Many of them want to go into professional schools and so on. So I remember meeting this young woman, a black woman. And I thought, oh, she just seems so enthralled. Look, I met her in a public setting, and she's like just looking at me to say, well, wow, 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 wow. She knew I was a doctor, and I got the sense that she was aspiring in that direction. She ended up in my class, and, very competitive. Well, she was the top student. I don't, she got the highest grades on the exam, to my surprise. She was a recent immigrant from Jamaica. And, I think me being that teacher, that faculty person,
Hmm.
gave her the comfort to excel. I didn't make her excel. She excelled. She did
Right,
the
right,
studies. She passed
right,
the exams.
right.
Compared to all the other students in the class, she got the number one grade. The
Mm.
second student is a woman from Guinea, a Muslim
Hmm.
woman. And again, in the setting, you're in the clear minority, and they don't see Black professors. And so she did well, got a good grade from me, but class 3, 4 months after the class, no, 6 months after the class, she writes me an email. She says, listen, I took a course and things didn't go so well, and it's threatening my future. I want to stay in the STEM. I want to study sciences. I want to stay in biology, but the school is discouraging me. They're redirecting me. And, I connected with her on Zoom, heard her story. And because I was on the inside at a level far removed from where she was, I knew that she was not getting a good deal. So I was
Hmm.
able to take this to a much higher level, higher than the level that she had taken it, to people who probably aren't likely to discriminate
Right, right,
because they're not
right,
threatened.
right.
So, I think, again, being a business owner, being at a certain level, it gives you,
Yes, yes,
it's not just about okay,
Right.
I'm going to make some money or whatever. That power that you have can continue in so many different ways. So I just wanted to give that little example, and that's the personal example.
Right. And it's a personal example that really
Mhm.
is important to our society and what is happening in our society in terms of some minute discrimination at that level. So thanks for
Mhm.
sharing that. I wanted to go and ask the same question to Cynthia. Blake, if you could just share with us, how is your business making a measurable difference in the lives of people you serve?
So for me, as you're aware, I am not a doctor.
Yes, yes.
I rely on my trusted Dr. Trisha. However, a kind culture is touching the lives of many just by being able to serve from a holistic perspective.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's more about making the space for Mother Earth to make a difference and
Mm-hmm.
holding that space for people that, kind of have become depressed or feel like the medical system has failed them. A lot of people have a hard time with getting the medicines that they need. And I think that overall, we've come away from what God has given us. And so I create the space for anyone that I come into contact with to go back to the simpler, more available things in life. So, where obviously medicine is a faster serve, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to herbalism, you're looking at uh, what the ailment, how long you've had the ailment, and in comparison to how long you would have to take the herb or the flower essence to see a difference. But it is something that our ancestors did, and so going back to that source is really where I'm more impactful, or where
Okay.
Mother Earth is more impactful.
Okay.
For me, I'm just a small human, just trying to make to create an opportunity for everyone
Okay.
to find wellness, be it in the body or spiritually or mentally.
So I wanted to just pick up on and piggyback on what you're saying, based on the level of work that you're doing. And I wanted to jump to question four, which speaks to some of the biggest challenges. So think of yourself and that your business that you're in. What's one of the biggest challenge that you have? And I'm thinking of things like financing or regulations, because when you're starting yourself and Trisha, are there is there a big challenge that you're facing right now that you can share with us? And go ahead, Cynthia, if you can just share that with us.
So for me, I am, from a financial perspective, I am really bootstrapping, if you will, a lot of the products. And, obviously I don't necessarily charge, by the fists for my consultations because of, just the where we are, right, from a financial perspective. For me, the challenge is people are scared to come into what they don't know. It's building that bridge between, all I know is Tylenol. All I know is Pepto Bismol, and here I am saying, hey, I have slippery elm, or I have nettle, or I have you know milk thistle that will help you in those ways. I know for Trish, one of the things that she came to me about a while ago was, hey, sis, I have this jumping in my eye. Now, again, I'm going to keep things very layman's terms. I don't even know the medical term for that. But, she kept on saying, I don't know how to fix that. And I said, you know what? Let's figure out what the root cause is. She was stressed. She wasn't sleeping. And so, I knew that lemon balm or chamomile in a tincture form would help her. Now, if she was to have gone to get, some type of sleepy medicine, it could have potentially hurt her pockets, even from the standpoint of going to see a doctor. Whereas for me, I can go and say, hey, take this flower. A lot of these flowers we find right outside. Take this flower steep it, or give it to me and I'll put it in some alcohol for you, so that you can take it within your tea. So for me, that was it's the space of the unknown, right? People just, we've come away from that. We've come away from what God has given us in this,
Right.
on this planet. And
Right.
so, and I'm not taking away from, science by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that would probably be the biggest thing. I'm also not accepting any insurances or anything like that.
Right.
So when you
Right.
come to me,
Right.
you're coming to me and we're going
Right.
outside and I'm showing you different weeds that are
Right.
growing in
Right.
your
Right.
backyard,
Right.
to help
Right.
you
Right.
out.
That as from the little medical background that I have, especially with pharmaceuticals, and the
Mm-hmm.
global branded products and so on. I have a lot of questions as far as regulatory is concerned, just because it has been in me and ingrained in me.
Mm-hmm.
But I will yield the question to Dr. Moore, if you can share what has been one of your biggest challenges as you face building the practice
Yeah.
before. So you want to look back and then move forward.
Yeah. Well, the biggest challenge that I have faced basically is a challenge of life in the Western world. It's
Uh-huh.
racism. One would think that one reaches a certain level of success, whether it's financially, whether it's professionally, that would go away. It never goes away. As a matter of fact, contrary to what one might think, it often increases because the higher you go is the more you are a threat.
Okay.
Um, I got to a point in life where I could afford my dream house, the place I wanted to live. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't live there. They wouldn't let me live there. They wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
let me buy it.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't even let me buy it
Mm-hmm.
cash.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's the same, even with your colleagues. You participate in organizations and you get to a certain level, you've put your time in, and then you stop and you see everybody pass. And we hear it. And somehow there is a false belief that yes, if you just work hard enough and go high enough, it goes away. It actually increases. And we see this. We see how, even at the level of the president of the United States, we see where, no, even after being one of the best, you're still considered less than.
Right,
So I
right,
think
right,
those are the challenges. So what
right,
we
right,
really, what we can find solace in is the fact that we do come from somewhere. We do
right,
come
right.
from a place where we can achieve, at least the ultimate. So I think that's the challenge that I have faced, and
Thank you.
it's not
Thank
going to
and
go
that,
away.
thanks a lot for sharing that. And I think some of it, it's like you're taking 10 steps, what, one step forward and 10 steps backward, because it seem to be a recurring thing that has been happening. As I found that out in my research from people like yourself at heads of organizations and the struggles that they've gone through and how they had to overcome it in order to become successful. But it is something as a recurring thing. And hopefully one day, you got to remain that positive. You got to have that hope that Dr. Carol says, that hope. I will ask Trisha if you can just respond to that question as well.
Well, for me, one of the biggest challenges has definitely been building, responsibility in technology, health, and privacy, and just human behavior all around the intersect. I think it's not enough to create a wearable device or even software that we're doing. You have to think carefully about consent, data privacy, user trust, and then just that integration and understanding that, okay, maybe for certain verticals that we offer, like for space, yeah, the astronauts and maybe mission control wants to see how stressed, their astronauts are. but for the consumer and maybe being in a work setting, you probably don't want your boss to see your stress. So for us, I do believe that is our biggest challenge is getting that data privacy and having certain, industries understand, hey, if we can do this for you, we can be more beneficial in the long term, and just having them wrap their head around that. You can't just rush into making certain promises when we're still in a very early phase about our data. So that is our number one constraint right now and our biggest challenge.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. We appreciate it. What I'm going to do is
Now it
to,
says,
I'm going to
oh,
ask,
oh, come on.
I,
I did.
I am going to ask, Eric Walcott has come in, and I will ask him to introduce his business and tell us a little bit about your business, just in a sentence, because we're already close to time.
Okay,
And we
see
want
if we could just unmute
uh,
there. Jeez,
we're hearing you, Eric. Just one second. I'm going to ask you the question.
I'm on mute.
What solutions have you discovered that others could learn from, Eric? If you want to share as a one sentence about your business, and then quickly share what solutions. We're at question 5. What solutions have you discovered that others could learn from? Eric,
I-
we can hear you. Go ahead and
That
speak,
asked
Eric.
me if I wanted to.
Go
It
ahead,
said
Eric.
accept.
We are hearing you, Eric. So we will go to
Hello,
Cynthia.
can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Can you go ahead and speak?
I
Eric,
am
we're hearing you.
unable to hear you guys.
Okay, so we will move on because time is against us as well. Eric, you can keep trying to get in.
Okay.
Dr. Moore, you want to share what solutions have you discovered that others could learn from? And we're talking about partnerships and business practices and community engagement, things like that. Loved what you had shared initially about being in the community and making house calls and so on. But if there's any solution that you think others can learn from?
Yeah, I'll take a lead from Trisha, because Trisha seems very much involved in the area of
This is
technology,
incredible.
which I have been also, throughout my career. As I mentioned, I had started out with the electronic health record very, very early, and now we're into AI. I think, as a micro business, we see now where we can use technology to, they use the word democratize, what we do,
Thank
democratize
you.
using technology to help us with our business. For example,
Um,
when after the pandemic, when it really became very difficult to find employees for my little micro practice, I went abroad. I was able to use technology to get virtual assistants. So it started out with a virtual assistant in some foreign country, but now we know that we can use technology to have our virtual assistants right there from our devices. Today in medicine in particular, we have ambient scribes. One of the things that, again, Trisha mentioned burnout. One of the things that, we as physicians face is burnout because there's so much work all the time. The technology helps us. So I think being involved with technology, staying with technology, and as one ages, one says, "Oh, it's for the young people." No, technology is for everybody.
That's
If
it.
you recall, if you recall, when the cell phones came, the older folks says, "I don't want that. I want to keep
Right,
dialing
right,
my little thing." But once they got the device in their hands,
right, right,
it opened up the world for them. And now I am
right,
just so
right,
fascinated when I see,
right.
much older people with their devices. And that technology not only solves it in the generational aspect, but even with respect to resources.
Right.
I was looking at a program on Cuba, and we see what's going on with Cuba today with the blockade and the increased pressure trying to starve the country out and all of that. But despite the imposed poverty. One of the things that I saw exist in there, in just about everybody, they had a device that kept them connected to the rest of the world. So I think
Right,
technology, staying with
right,
technology,
right,
embracing it, and always, trying to keep
right,
up, no matter what it is. I think that's a solution for a
right,
lot of
right.
us.
So thank you very much for sharing that. And time again is running away when we're having fun. You know how that works already. I think, Dr. Moore, one of the things that you have as a strength is that you're molding minds and being the person responsible for the Ignite Caribbean 30 under 30. I'm always thrilled to see young people out there who are learning, and young people who are learning, and the exposure that you yourself can give to them at the level that you're molding them now can, like catapult them. I use the word ignite them into the society to make an impact that we ourselves are may not able to be made to make now, because you're making it from behind the scenes. Trisha, you want to jump and share what solutions? And again, I'm asking if you could just do it succinctly, because time is
Sure.
speed.
One major solution and lesson I believe is just start with the problem, not the technology. It's easy to become excited about artificial intelligence and wearables, but the real question is what meaningful problem is solving for the person? And I
Right.
think that's what I've learned, and we have to start with the person and the human to get a viable solution.
Right, right. Thanks a lot for sharing that. I think, Dr. Moore, as you were speaking about the technology and the older folks, and you're happy to see them, I don't think they have a choice, because I know I'm working with my aunt on Humana and all of those, and it's like pulling teeth because they're forcing. They can't communicate unless they're using that technology. So I will ask Cynthia if she could just share um, what solutions she has
Yeah.
discovered.
So for me, one of the things that I've discovered is that it's okay to try something different. Um, it's it's really how I came up with pine culture to begin
Absolutely.
with the herbalism and the body butters and things like that. In the Western culture, there's a fear, right? And I think we have to learn how to move past the stigma and realize that we've been on this earth, and at one point we didn't need the medicine because the medicine was in the earth. And I think that it's okay for us to go back to that, go back home.
Mhm. Okay, perfect. We need to go back home, right?
That's right.
So, Trisha, I will start with you with looking ahead. What is number question 6 that we have? Looking ahead, what is the next step for your business?
For our business
What
is the
opportunities do you
validation.
see there?
It's the validation and responsible growth and just building the evidence that we need to scale and working with a couple of universities. And that's what's next. We're focused on just developing and getting pilot programs right now to strengthen our software. And it's a bright future. We're just looking for partnerships. So that's
Yeah,
what's next for us.
yes. I like the keyword partnerships, but you have to
Yes.
define what type of partnerships, though.
I understand. All right now, if you care about people.
Dr. Moore, what opportunities excite you most? What looking ahead? What's your next
Look,
step?
looking ahead, I think what we all of us need to do is we need to use technology better. I think what has happened is most of the time when we're using technology, we put it in front of us.
Right.
Technology should always be behind. Humans should communicate with humans. Now, at my age, I have to see doctors. I am the HIT guy, I'm the AI guy, but I don't want to talk to the machine. The doctor
Right,
can use
right,
the machine to
right,
do
right.
everything, to know about me, to get the summary of everything, to gather my records. But I am not going to give my heart, my soul, my mind to a machine.
Give
I
my
want to
heart to
give
a
it to a
machine.
human being.
And it seems tantamount to what I think Trisha had said about her. So let's start with the problem. Trisha, you want to go ahead and share?
With the problem.
No,
Um, you know,
yes, what is the opportunities that you see looking ahead for the next step for your business?
Well, looking ahead, I piggybacking off of Dr. Moore. I mean, again, it's how we are able to mitigate the combination of technology and people. And I think if we were able to keep the technology not only behind us, but understand that it comes second to us. We can shift from being really like reactive in our care to being proactive. And that's what I want to do. I want to be proactive. I want to go back to the Caribbean and give these teachings to them to say, listen, this is not something that you shouldn't be aware of. This is how you can use this
Right,
for prevention. This is how we can use the technology more community centered based organizations for people to come in and kind of have, that's where those partnerships will come in. And to
right,
bring my technology back to the Caribbean to say, listen, this is how you use it. How can we help, support, and address the stress, chronic illness, and well-being before they become a crisis? So that's what I see for the opportunities.
right, right. I love it before they become a crisis. Being proactive. Think here.
Yes, ma'am. So for me, as a smaller company, I think if we're able to merge, and I want to obviously be respectful to all of the doctors and, medicine and science, I think there's an opportunity of integration. I think that, if we're able to figure out how we can create a merging of the two, herbalism, flower essences, and then bring in, a very scientific look at how we can group the two to one create a little bit more expansion for people that cannot afford, right? If
Right,
if
right,
more doctors,
right,
and again, no disrespect intended, but if more doctors believed in where their medicine is coming from, which is from the herbs, from the flower.
right, right.
I think that there could be a great marrying of the two, and we could reach more people.
So I think actually they do understand that because pharmaceuticals, for example, that they prescribe the products, they're all from the plants and the medicine. That's how they create the medicines. But in the regulatory environment where you get all of that all wrapped up together, that's where the cost comes in and the
Mm-hmm.
consumer pays the price. So it's, as you say, a merging of the two as to how you can lower costs for it. And the generics do assist with lowering the costs, but getting back to
Mm-hmm.
the well-being and those traditional medicines as you're mentioning there. So I'm going to move
Absolutely.
on. I have Eric who is on the line, but before I get to Eric, what I want you to all do is, because we're almost closing, I wanted you to just respond to this sentence. And as we respond to this sentence, I will go and end with Eric going through just introducing us to his business, not to start over the conversation, but because of the technological issues that he was having. The question is, Dr. Moore, as I'm seeing you, the single greatest opportunity to improve health and well-being in the Caribbean over the next decade is, complete that sentence.
Is to nationalize healthcare delivery.
Nationalized healthcare delivery. I like that. And Trisha,
Bring awareness back to the Caribbean so everyone can be on the same page.
to bring awareness back. And Cynthia,
Everything we need is outside in the rain, in the sun, in the air, and we need to relearn our land like our ancestors did.
we just need to go outside.
We just need to go outside.
If we're not going how when we go outside, we're not going to see it. But thank you. Also, I will now ask Eric if you can just just tell us. The first question was tell us about your business, and then if you can wrap up with the question that we just asked, the what opportunities excite you, the single greatest opportunity to improve health and well-being in the Caribbean over the next decade. I don't want to jump into the opportunities that excite you, Eric, because I know you're very excited about healthcare. Eric, can you go ahead?
Thank you very much, Dr. Cameron, for affording me this opportunity. ICS continues to push much greater than its actual weight, position, standing, as some may perceive, but it's a big player in this marketplace. And I want to start from the end so that I don't take the conversation too far back. I think one of the biggest opportunities that we have currently is really focusing on establishing centers of excellence in the Caribbean. Oftentimes, each Caribbean island tries to do the same thing. And I think we have an opportunity to really, for example, establish maybe Jamaica as one of the centers of excellence in doing cardiovascular type stuff. We have, let's say, St. Lucia that can be doing another focus area in terms of internal medicine. And this is part of what we have benefited from the out-migration that we've had. We now have a diaspora that occupies or continue to provide services in a majority of the city centers around the world, whether it be in
Eric,
New York.
can I interrupt you
Sorry.
there for you to
Mhm.
just share from the context, because you're speaking a lot of forward-thinking stuff, but we don't know who you are. If you want to just share what
Sure.
it is what business
So,
you're in, and then you can wrap up with that.
my name is Eric Walcott, and I am the managing partner of Org Development Investment LLC, and we focus a lot in the long-term care space, particularly in home health, assisted living, substance use disorder, and mental health disorder agencies.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. You can go ahead.
yeah. So one of the reasons why, and my experience have started from working within state health agencies and also working in international development. Although my medical background goes back to my young days as a young soldier within the Army as a medical specialist, being the first line of health services to a platoon of about 30, 40 soldiers. My initial thought as I was a kid was interested in surgery. So I was always interested in medicine and taking all the sciences. But one of the things I quickly recognized is that there were often a lot of gaps in terms of healthcare provision within state health agencies, especially in long-term care. And so I was involved with the Department of Health in the District of Columbia and first started doing work in HIV and doing technical assistance and capacity building to providers so that we could strengthen key staff so that we could have better client level outcomes. So from that time, I was appointed by the medical director to deal with special projects. So that gave me a special vantage point. Wherever there was a problem, whether it be trying to fix a failing hospital or to try to figure out how we could get these providers, build their capacity so that the quality of services can be better. So I got engaged with that. I became a known expert of sorts. Now, Dr. Moore, I will, one of the agencies that came under, and I started doing mergers and acquisitions of various health providers. One of them was called Doctors on Call, and a retired colonel, Dr. Walter Forget, good friend of mine, continues to be to this day. That was what Doctors on Call was meant to be, meant to do. We had another Antiguan St. Kitts and Nevis.
We have 30 seconds for you, Eric.
Yeah, and let me just say, he continues to do home services, right? And that's a key. Now, in terms of the biggest opportunity right now, I think, is with a lot of folks setting up their own agencies, everything from home care. As you know, it's probably about $139 billion business. Although with the cuts, I think by 6.5%, you still are up there in the 100+ billion. It's one of the biggest growing and dealing with everything from allowing individuals to age with dignity at home by providing home health services,
Right,
to
right.
training of home service providers from nurses to CNAs to home health aides, and all of the ancillary services around that. So this is what my business is set up to do. Currently helping out in places like Tennessee, Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia, and we're expanding out.
Yes, thank you so much, Eric, for that. Really sad that you weren't able to join us before because I heard you talking about some numbers, numbers are always important to conversations and also we're sorry that you weren't able to connect us with to provide some more valuable
Well,
insight. We want to just give
yes.
thanks to the panelists, and we have another session that is coming up. But I want to close with saying today's conversation demonstrates that innovation in healthcare does not only come from large institutions. So what we're doing in our own neck of the woods is it's really being driven by entrepreneurs, practitioners like yourselves, caregivers, and community leaders who are finding practical ways to improve lives every day. Their experience reminds us that solutions already exist. We now need to scale what works. And I think that I'm saying that for the benefit of especially Cynthia. This framing keeps the focus squarely on their enterprise, their innovation, their impact, their lessons learned, and their future plans, which is exactly what an MSME audience wants to hear. So I like established centers of excellence in the Caribbean. That's what you're sharing. You said there, Eric, and I will wrap up with that's I think the same thing was echoed by Tricia and Dr. Mora as well. Any last comments before we
I want to
go?
make a comment to Eric. I meant if you heard the first part that I had made about 10,000 house calls by 2000, 8,000 of them was made with doctors on call.
Right.
Thank you. And
Excellent.
I see
Excellent.
Charmaine opened her window because the next session is about to begin. So thank you very much, everyone who participated, and we hope you got some valid information. Thank you. Great
Thank you.
conversation.
Take care, guys. All the best. Ciao, ciao.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this section in the MSME Forum for National Caribbean American Heritage Month. We have several innovators and pioneers and leaders logging in from across America and the Caribbean, from Belize to Suriname and across the diaspora. We're absolutely thrilled to have you here. My name is Charmaine Graves-Sandy, and I'm a member of the ICS Program Board with responsibility for information systems and projects in the diaspora. I will be your moderator for today. Today's session is on digital transformation with special focus on cybersecurity and AI and how it impacts MSMEs. Our speaker today has a wealth of experience in technology. Allow me to introduce Danietta Fleming Magana. Danietta is a certified information systems security professional and a fellow of the Institute of Strategic Risk Management, who founded Covenant Security Solutions in 2003. Her goal is to push the envelope regarding how we think about information and find new and innovative ways to secure our digital way of life. Mrs. Magana is a certified information security specialist, and she also has published in the Defense Information Systems Agency newsletter and interviewed as an expert on Federal News Radio, Mark Antona's show. Ms. Magana received a Black Engineer Award for the most promising engineer in government. She is an advisory board member of Tiny G, Global Terrorism Information Network, and Armed Forces Communications and Electronic Association International Technology Committee. She's a graduate of the University of Illinois Urbana. I hope I'm getting this right.
Yeah, Urbana.
Champaign,
Yes.
with a BS in engineering. Please help me welcome Danietta Magana. Hi, Danietta. I'm gonna promote
Hi,
you.
how are you, Charmaine? It's great to
I am
speak with you
good.
again.
I am good. Okay, welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, so this session is somewhat free-flowing, but in the
Okay.
same vein, it's on some very serious, critical topics that affect us all. I've always said I've been in technology myself for 30 years at different levels. You know, I've been a programmer into designing systems, into the more modern ways of using, even developing websites. People don't realize a website is a system, you know, but I've done a lot of things and seen the evolution of technology. But since the past 2 years, with the introduction of AI, AI is now available to everybody, regardless of whether you use the technology or understand the technology, or whether you're a student or, you know, an elderly person, you
Right.
are involved in technology now. So this session is really about talking with the serious technological things that we need to be aware of, not just from the user standpoint and all of the nice glitz and glam thing,
Right.
but how there's some risks and so on that we need to be aware of. So I'm gonna just hand it over to you and ask you to speak about your experience, your personal experience over the few years, and talking about the evolution also, and then we can go into some more specifics.
Oh, absolutely. So once again, thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy our conversations and when we get the opportunity to share around all things cyber, which is one of my passions. And I wanted to kind of start off talking sort of the tagline we adopted maybe about 20 something years ago when I started the company was securing your digital way of life. And what I watched at that time was this continued adoption of taking everything that we do and figuring out how we can make this be completed through a computer, right? It started off back in the days of sort of like IBM. Everyone was all excited. Oh my goodness, we got a server and it can keep track of all your information so you don't need these paper files anymore. So now we've got everything on the computer. Well, you fast forward to now, where the word cloud, people barely talk about it anymore because we're all talking about artificial intelligence. And just to level set, I think the key thing with artificial intelligence is that it's artificial, right? And I think people have to understand that what they're in essence doing is trying to get machines to mimic the thought process and the processing that goes on within the human experience. And I want to start there because I think a lot of what has put people make them, I guess, trust is that they believe they're seeing something that they're not really seeing. So you don't mind letting it handle your schedule or handle your bank account or help you locate your family member or your children because it mimics real intelligence, but it's not. It's artificial, which means that it's a series of instructions and um, computers that have been put together in a way to pretend, I would say, to provide you with the same interface as if you were talking to another person. And it's very important to make that distinction because it's still learning, and sometimes we can look online and see, the robots, they wave at you or they make human-like interactions, but the reality is that it's not human. And I think in this time, one of the things that's so critical is that we just have to learn how to continue to connect with each other and understand, even though all of this digital technology is coming online and more we're being kind of forced down that road, right? Because everything from money to how you interact at the hospital, all of that is transforming in real time. And so I just wanted to kind of start with that because I think so often we see it and we assume that, oh, it's just the same. It's not the same. And I think as we continue to go forward, we're going to realize it's regurgitating knowledge, but intelligence to me is so much more than someone regurgitating knowledge. And so, I'm going to take a quick break there and see if you had anything you wanted me to follow up on. I know I said a couple of different
Yes.
things.
No, but what I'd follow up on is that it's interesting that our session is following the health segment.
Mm,
And one of what came through that segment is the concern about, there's so much talk about technology, and we don't want to lose the human element. And especially as Caribbean people, we're really
mhm.
touchy-feely,
Right.
and
Right.
so there is adoption, there's slow adoption, certainly in within smaller
Mhm.
businesses.
Yes.
We use some of the technology every day, as I said before,
Hmm.
without unknowingly. But
Unknowingly,
I'm
yes.
really pleased, as you said, you're emphasizing the fact that this is artificial, and we we need not get into the space where we become so dependent on something that is not really representing us as humans generally.
Absolutely.
And so we should continue to, especially as I say,
Hmm.
across the region, culturally, we want to ensure that, yes, we will embrace it because, in
Right.
our workplaces or however we use it, we embrace it. But we should not get to the point where it takes us over fully. So thank you for that. So
Yeah,
now I'd like you
absolutely.
to, right.
Hmm.
So I'd like you now to go more into, your maybe your products that,
Hmm.
we can talk about. That, as I said before, the audience is mostly, persons who are solopreneurs, they're small business persons. So you can talk generally about the factors and the risks, but also maybe move into the products that you may have or
Right.
recommend that we can.
Absolutely. So before I jump right into the products, I kind of want to pull the little thread of talking about the artificial and what people need to be looking out for. Um, you know, for example, with healthcare, you were just saying, and I actually just saw something this morning that was saying a lot of hospitals here in the States, and I assume this is going to happen globally, where they're starting to do diagnosis with taking the AI, and it will be able to make, in many cases, very correct diagnosis. Sometimes it can find things that a traditional doctor will not be able to find. However, it all is dependent upon how it was coded, what information was provided to it, And it's like with anything, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you aren't putting in accurate information, if you aren't verifying that information that's going on in, you're less likely to get results that are beneficial to you, your organization, and actually that can protect you. And so that kind of leads into where we are as an organization in terms of helping small business. We have been in this space for 23 years in cybersecurity as an organization. And one of the big things we found, especially for the small and medium-sized businesses, is that oftentimes they are forced adopters of the technology, right? So you often are told by a larger contractor or your state and local government, whoever is your end customer, that this is our system and you need to find a way into it. And you aren't necessarily the technology driver. You're the person that has to adopt, adjust, and figure out how you're going to make this work and happen. And so that's where we looked at the unique issue of that from a small business perspective. And we developed our cyber core cyber platform. And you can get to it at www.corecyber.io. And what we do in that platform is help you to be able to understand, well, what are those risks? They asked me to join this system, but what is it that I need to be concerned about? And the whole piece is once you log in, you can go through, take a risk assessment, and that risk assessment is helping you understand in plain English. That was one of my big things that we had to make it non-technical, make it so that if you are running a healthcare company, if you're running a legal firm, you don't have to understand cybersecurity and technology in order to get information that's valuable for you. And so we take you through getting a risk assessment, understanding what does this mean for my business? If I'm a law firm, what are the regulations that I have to be concerned about? And then what does it mean, right? When they say you have to protect this data and it's the privacy law, well, we break down what that means. What what are they asking for? What does that mean in non-technical terms? And what does that translate in terms of the questions that you need to be asking to your providers? Because many of our small businesses, you're using a larger network. You're coming through a telecom, you're coming through another organization in order to have your technology infrastructure. So understanding how to differentiate what are those questions, what are the policies and procedures you need to have inside your own company, because it's not all on that provider. You know, we like to always talk about data breaches and, this virus. That's coming through and stealing information. Um, that's not necessarily the big deal now anymore because more and more of those providers are using artificial intelligence. So they're able to stop things right when they happen. They're able to get in front of those sorts of issues. So where the criminals and the bad actors are switching to now is that they're coming in and looking at your dentist's office and saying, hey, how are you keeping your records? Is there somebody here who's working for you who may be having financial difficulty? What if I gave them an extra $2,000 a month and they decided to take copies of your records and hand them to me because then I can use them to do identity fraud. So policies and procedures and how you look at your data, how you look at your customer data, how you look at your business, that's becoming the big area now. And that's exactly what we help you with within the platform. Helping you figure out, well, what is it? How do we protect? What are the things I'm not thinking about that I do need to be thinking about? And we walk you through that step by step.
Okay, wonderful. I'm
Mm.
really happy you went into that level of detail because one of the things that in the region, I'm in
Mhm.
Jamaica. I'm from
Yes.
Jamaica and in Jamaica
Mhm.
now. And but I work across the region.
Mhm.
And as we said before, that the technology, most of the technology that we use is US based.
Mhm.
And one of the things each country has started to look at is developing their own um, laws and policies around technology, because we are working across borders, but
Mhm.
the legal issues are
Yes.
not focused on, in terms of if an issue happens within country, how is that, how is that governed? How is that prosecuted even? Because
Mhm.
when it's a cross-border situation. So a number of countries in the region
Mhm.
are now adopting, data protection,
Yes.
the
Mhm.
Data Protection Act, certainly in Jamaica and
Mhm.
other countries in the region. And so those are some of the things they're looking at in terms of how do you address
Right.
issues that may come up. In addition to that, we now have a task force that
Mhm.
really um, speak into the issues before they actually become, as I say, policy or law
Absolutely.
stage. And so the conversation really needs to continue working with, professions in the field. And I
Mhm.
do know, Daniela, that you work across borders.
I
So you
do. Mhm.
actually, we have to have some more conversation, bring you into the mix, into some of the things that we're doing across the
Mhm.
region as well. So, okay. So we can
Yeah.
now, as I said,
Well,
we want
actually, before you move on, I wanted to bring up one particular point that you were kind of alluding to, is that a lot of nations are starting to figure out what it means to be data sovereignty.
to,
Right. That is a very, very big term across many nations and especially across the global South, where
Mhm.
we're asked, people are starting to ask the question that if my data is being housed in a
Right,
data center in Ohio and I'm in Jamaica, what happens?
right,
Right. And
exactly.
how do I recover my organization because the laws of the US don't apply
Right,
necessarily to a Jamaican business. And so at the end of the day, that's a very critical piece that's happening globally. And what that takes is also looking at infrastructure, because part of the reason that's happening is because there aren't data centers, there aren't
right,
the capacity built locally to be able to house your information
right,
within region.
right,
And so the minute you take your data outside the region, now you're dealing with the laws, the complexities of what that means. That's especially trying for companies that are doing global business and have a global footprint.
right,
If you have, data that you're collecting on, say, a European citizen, they have their own laws and regulations. They've
right.
got they seem to be coming out with new ones almost every 3 to 4 months now.
Yeah,
In Europe
exactly.
alone, so they've got the DORA, which is
Yes,
their new NIS2. So they've got a lot of
right.
new
They have to,
regulations that are
right,
coming out, and you're still held accountable. They don't say, okay, well, you're in the Caribbean, so we don't it doesn't
exactly.
apply. You're still held accountable to those regulatory requirements and how you're managing data across borders.
Right,
And so that's something we also bring into our
right.
platform as well. So people can see how do they map to all of these different regulations globally.
Okay, right. Okay, so the next thing I want to move to is looking at the cost benefit analysis, or the
Hmm.
ROI, the return on
Hmm.
investment of for both cybersecurity and AI, because there may be some overlap for
Yes.
you,
Hmm.
just from a broad perspective, because that's one of the challenges that I realize even larger corporations are seeing now. They're saying, until they're affected by something, they're just like, okay, why do
Yeah.
I really have to invest in something that, technology, while it's useful tools, there is a
Hmm.
cost to it.
There is.
So we want to talk about some of the at a high level,
Hmm.
what are the things, if you have a client, that you would speak to in terms of the return on investment,
Right.
in engaging a solution for them.
Absolutely. Well, one of the big things is to get people to really understand how interconnected and how reliant they are in the digital ecosystem, because oftentimes we make assumptions that we aren't as connected as we are. And unfortunately, for a lot, especially for small business, um, the first time they're asking that critical question is once an incident happens. And there's been several studies. This number kind of fluctuates, but for the most part, for small businesses, if they have an incident, a data breach, they typically it's going to be around $5 million. And that's 5 million US dollars.
US.
So, or they tend to go out of business if they don't have it. So it's not a question of if you're going to have an incident. Oftentimes, it's a matter of when you have an incident and how you can recover from it. And it's extremely important to start asking questions of where am I interconnected into the digital realm? Going back to our dentist office example, right? You may think, oh, not that much. I do a little bit with patient records, but think about a day where you can't get to your patient records. Can your offices be open? You might have an administrator up front, and maybe if you're in a small jurisdiction, you know everybody, you can continue to operate. But, if you're in a larger ecosystem, like if you're in Kingston or someplace where, there's a lot of people, you're probably not going to operate your office off
Right.
of, hey, I know this person, I can go ahead and when the computers come back up. So we're all interconnected. Or say if you need to pay your employees,
Right.
these are all real, tangible, everyday things that people don't think about, that you assume, if it goes down, how am I going to handle it? And, an employee not getting paid, they don't want to hear that the telecom went down. They could care less. They've got bills. They want to know,
Exactly.
how are you going to handle that? And so, understanding your digital ecosystem is so critical, and
Right.
that's usually where I start. First, really understand, how are you going to function? If tomorrow morning you had zero internet, how would you function? And can you function? And
Right.
oftentimes when people sit down and ask that critical question, they realize they can't function, or if they are able to function, it's at such a reduced capacity. And that's where we then start talking about, well, what are the policies? What are the procedures? How would you handle that?
Right.
What are those things that you need to do in advance of that happening? Because with all of these storms, we like to say, oh, it's 99.9% uptime. You see that everywhere nowadays. But reality is you could have one storm come through and that's it, right? Once it goes down,
Right.
we've had days here in the States where power's been out for
Yes.
17 hours, and you're sitting there
Well,
thinking like, we've got a pretty robust infrastructure, but anything can
right.
happen. And so you have to really think about that from a digital
Yes.
perspective. How
And
do I
and
cover? How
and
do I
then
keep going?
just
Hmm.
yes, definitely. And for our audience, just because as I said,
Hmm.
we're in the Americas.
Yes.
But as I said, many of us either we reside in the Caribbean
Hmm.
or we're cross border, so
Right.
in the
Hmm.
Caribbean, and in one sense I know sometimes there's always this tone that, oh, maybe we don't have the same resources, in terms of technology. I gotta say, when I came back to Jamaica, which is over 20
Hmm.
years ago now, can't even believe it's so
Hmm.
long, that they had broadband here that was more, and when I
Right.
was living in Florida, I didn't have it. So we had better systems um,
Hmm.
than I remember in Florida at that particular
Yes.
time. But we also have, it depends on where you live, because we
Hmm.
we are, some rural parts of the country still don't have internet, for example.
Right.
And across the region, we have that similar dynamic. There, we have
Hmm.
the high-end, sophisticated things, but we also have a huge part of the population that still don't even have, access to
Right.
the
Basic.
internet
Hmm.
or even
Hmm.
telephone service, or, that kind of thing. So we
Hmm.
always have to be, looking at both sides of the coin.
Hmm.
We do have a high penetration of mobile phones, for example,
Yes.
but the other challenge is, are they using it in the way that they can, say, within business? Everybody probably use a mobile phone socially,
Right.
and use the app socially, but we
Hmm.
don't utilize it in the businesses, or if there's a disaster, for example, because, certainly the Caribbean has been hit by several within the past 2, 3 years.
Yes.
We've had some major hurricanes. We hadn't experienced any in a little while. We were fortunate, but the
Hmm.
past 2, 3 years we've been hit with Category 5, direct hit
Wow.
Category 5. And so we have to really start to rethink, what can we do to have this balance? We are so dependent on technology, but what are the things that we really have to factor in? Should we be running parallel systems, like manually, some kind of options that we should be looking at?
Yes.
You know, do we have to boost our solar system? Yes, we're in the Caribbean, but most of us still use, regular electricity. So I think we have to have that conversation simultaneously in terms of our, there's a discussion about security, and we think of security oftentimes, in terms of technological cybersecurity, or we think
Right.
about, physical security, locking our doors. But we're not thinking about food security, and we're not thinking about, as I said, environmental security. And
Right.
it's all,
It's all
intertwined,
intertwined. Yes, it
all
is.
intertwined, which is really
Sustainability is a big, big issue right now for
right, right.
across the globe for the very reasons you're saying. I mean, we just got finished, I think in the last 24 hours, there were three major earthquakes, two hit Venezuela at the
It,
same time. So these
right,
things aren't, it used to be you get a 7.5 one every decade, right? That
exactly.
all the news agencies would fly in. I mean, it was like a major event. And now
Yeah,
no one's flying anywhere because next week
right,
there's probably going to be another 7.5 somewhere. And
right.
so this is
Yeah,
something that every business, and especially small business, if you have to think about sustainability, it's no longer when I get to this amount of money, I'm going to think about how I'm sustainable.
right,
That's an issue for all of us. We all have to think about what does it mean? How are we going to continue to keep operations? Getting back to the piece I was saying earlier, how do we protect our staff, our people?
right, right,
Do you have a call out list, right? And a manual call out list, because if
right,
your phone
still,
goes down,
right.
the idea that you're gonna
Yeah,
get go on your phone and get everybody's number. That
yeah,
that's not and then how do you reach people, right? How do you reach your critical staff?
mm-hmm,
If you're running a hedge fund or you're running a medium-sized business and you want to be able to reach your critical staff, it may be that you need to have satellite phones,
right,
right? Because the idea that the telco is going to have service, or when they get service back, you just don't know. So these
right,
are all the critical issues that, quite frankly, whether you're a one person, one man band, all the way up to a multi-billion, now we've got trillion-dollar companies.
mm-hmm,
Everyone has to think about how do we manage when the
right,
technology leaves. And that's another piece in terms
yes,
of also jumping back to artificial intelligence. um I was leading with the artificial piece because it can make mistakes, and it does
yes,
make mistakes multiple times a day or a session if you're actually using it on a regular basis.
right,
It does make mistakes, and it's very important for organizations to understand what their ground truth is.
right,
Everything you can't hand over to artificial intelligence,
right, right.
because sometimes it'll argue with you because it thinks it's right,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
It got three
Uh,
pieces of bad information, and now it's telling you, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, I think I
Right.
do know what I'm talking about. you
So
know,
true.
uh, so I think we're entering probably what they call it a time of change.
Yes,
And I think
definitely.
it's more important now than ever for organizations not to just look digitally, but also to understand that human aspect,
Yes,
and that's where I started. It's our digital way of life, but it's not our lives. And
yes,
and I think it's very important for organizations to just look at all of it, and then to be prepared that you might have to do life without technology for a period of time. And
right.
how do you
Eh,
do that?
Yes. So I'm going to segue. I'm going to go off
Mhm.
the track just a little bit. So we do
Yes.
we do have time, and
Mm.
then we come back to,
Okay.
some other
Perfect.
things. Because one of the things that we have, as I said, AI, for the
Mhm.
average person, someone who probably never even turned on a computer knows, the term
Yeah.
AI now. So
Mhm.
it's in our psyche every day. And also in terms of usage. Companies are now doing, even the larger companies, everybody's putting in a chat bot, for example. So I'm saying I'm
Yes.
going off the beaten path a little bit.
Right.
So the experience that I've had, certainly within the region, with some of these chatbots, is that they're not, they're clearly not intuitive, and they're
No.
not, they may have a list of initial questions that, you can pick A, B, C, and it points you to the right channel. Okay, I don't want to call a company's name or go to detail,
Right,
but
right. No.
but it
That
points you
that could
to
be any company.
could be any company. So it points you then to the next service. But the
Mhm.
questions that you need to ask and really digest, it can't answer it, but it doesn't give you an option to say, okay, let me now send you over to a human. I'm seeing a lot of that happen now. And it is, as I say, this is just a conversation thing because
Yeah, you have
I
to be
see
insistent. Now, some
it's,
of them do have a mode that if you're insistent and you keep
yeah,
saying human, human, I want a human,
right.
eventually it relents
Mm-hmm.
and it stops sending you in a loop with other
Right.
AI agents,
Yes.
and takes you to a human. But that's the reason why I was saying it's so important for people to understand the artificial nature of this. It doesn't
Right.
know what it doesn't know. And yes, it
Yeah.
does save a lot of money because in the past you had to have a human being watching that. And a human being required payment, required
Mhm.
benefits, they required
Right.
hours. It has to, we gotta
Right.
sleep. That's a part of our nature.
Hmm.
And but it's a lot different now when you talk technology. And
Right.
I think you're going to see, unfortunately, a lot more of that. And
Hmm.
that might be a bit of a cautionary tale for businesses because while we all are also adopting it, not just using it, but adoption of
Right.
artificial intelligence within our organizations, understand it's not, it only knows what it's been taught. And and to your point, it's not intuitive because it doesn't have feelings. It
Right.
it feigns feelings. So you see the people out here who have their AI girlfriends and boyfriends and all of that, but it's not a real emotional connection because it doesn't have emotions. It cannot have emotions. It's a bot.
Yes.
So therefore, all it can do is feign that. It can give you an artificial sense that that's what it's doing. You
Mhm.
say, my cat died. Oh, I feel so bad because it's been taught to say, oh, I feel so bad. Not
Right.
because it really feels that, right?
Exactly. It
It's
just,
being
yeah.
taught to regurgitate
Yes.
information to you. And people get lost in it because they want words and they want
Hmm.
that that empathy so bad that they think that the bot is giving them that, but it
Right.
can't. It's incapable of doing that. That's you
Yeah.
have to be a soul
Yes. Yes.
to have a
Absolutely.
soul connection,
That's
right?
young. Yes. Yeah. And I'm seeing a lot of that. There is somewhat of a balance because people are feeling it, you
Hmm.
get overwhelmed with technology. And as I
Yeah.
said, we are seeing and it sometimes depends on your age and stage in life.
Hmm.
But I'm also seeing somewhat of a balance with people, as you say, some of what you're saying, that people are reaching out more. I mean, we all went through COVID. COVID is,
Hmm.
we're 5 years or almost 6 years out of COVID, but it
Yeah.
really was life-changing for us globally.
Yeah.
And in one sense, it made us connect. We can,
Hmm.
here we go, we can connect,
Right.
but in the same in a way we're more distant because the technology is so much in our face, and we're missing out on that side. But I'm also seeing some of as I
You're
said, just
finding more of
following
the
the
young,
health, the
like the
health
Gen
panel
Z.
that we're putting that in the fore, that we must
Hmm.
remember that we are human first and we need to
Yes.
interact with each other, and be more community driven.
Hmm.
Some very basic things around are just touching on healthcare a little bit.
Yes.
You realize, as I say, even with the technology, at the end of the day, the human
Hmm.
has to take care of another human. Because
Absolutely.
sometimes people heal from that, not necessarily, you hear
Right.
of these stories and some these miracles, and you're like, you didn't realize that these things really happen. But I can relate to it now personally, that there is something in that human interaction that
Human
helps with your
interaction.
healing. So, okay, so now we're
Yeah,
gonna
and
get back. Oh,
hopefully you
sorry.
don't lose it, because I'm gonna add one piece to that, because we're finding with the Gen Z and some of the Gen A, so the younger generation, so this would be like 25 and under.
Right.
We're finding some of them starting to disconnect, right? You've got two categories. You got the ones who are starting to disconnect because they're realizing the mental health toll,
Yeah.
right? Because they're constantly on social media, they're constantly being fed something from an algorithm, from artificial intelligence, and they're realizing it's taking a mental health toll on them. And those that can identify it are disconnecting on their own.
Yeah.
And then you have some of them who are so interconnected, they can't they can't interact with reality, right? Like they can't hold a conversation. They
Hmm.
can't relate to their peers, because they've grown up literally in a technology bubble.
Right.
So it's very critical, and that's part of the reason that I'm saying, the human aspect, because then you have people who take advantage of it, right? Because if you're in a constant technology bubble, then you stop having social skills. Then when the bot or anyone who's behind that screen says, I care about you, I love you, that's how we're getting children that are being trafficked. That's how we're getting children who are falling for scams online, and then they're being put in a situation where they're exposing themselves, and then someone's extorting them for money. So there's a lot behind, um, that aspect of just kind of pushing people. I love technology. I've done it for 30 years, but reality is that we have to push as well the human aspect. There's nothing like it. And that can't be replicated. I don't care what a bot says. I don't care how much empathy. If it gives you a hug at the end of the day, it's being told to do that. It's not doing it from a soul perspective. Uh-oh. Hello? I think we got disconnected.
Did she get disconnected?
Yes, I think she did.
I think you'll give her a second before. Interesting conversation, though. Very knowledgeable. Love what is happening and all. Very interesting conversation.
Oh,
And the
thank
knowledge
you.
that you're sharing. I heard the last part. I started thinking about the Gen Zs that
Yeah,
are,
that's our future. And
yes, it is our future.
that's that's one of the areas I
Mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
put a lot of energy
Mm-hmm.
into, because I think we are not
Mm-hmm.
recognizing, we're saying they're learning online, but
Yes,
what's happening to them emotionally
yes,
and
yes,
spiritually,
yes.
and they're drowning.
Right.
Some of our children are literally drowning. And, when we get older and we're ready to go into someone's nursing home or be taken care of, they aren't in a place to even be able to do that.
So she's back.
Yeah, yeah.
There,
Yes.
They
Go
need
ahead,
us to do
Shirley.
that.
there we
Yeah.
go. All right, let me just get us all okay. Let me just do it this way. Okay. Okay. Thanks. There we go. Just as we're talking, always,
Yes, exactly. How technology is.
Yes, yes. Just like a split second outage, and it caused that. Okay,
Mhm,
great. And thank you, Dr. Shelley, as
mhm,
well for filling in there. All right,
A
so
pleasure.
mhm,
we got a few more minutes. But and so Danielle, so let's go back into the solution, some cybersecurity solution, without getting into too much detail.
mhm,
But just, we are aware of, yes, the broader things, we
mhm,
use emails, and we use productivity tools. We've been using that for 20 years, regardless of what industry you're in or personally. So, we're going to use Word documents and maybe spreadsheets and presentations. But in terms of applications for our business, and more specifically now, what can protect our business? Can you speak about some of that, other tools that we really should be using or incorporating into the day-to-day business operations?
From a cybersecurity perspective, that's changing in real time. So I'm going to give you sort of the old and the new, okay?
Okay, sure.
Sort of along the older lines, at a minimum for a small business, being able to have antivirus, which is really, sort of your Nortons, your Bitdefenders, some level of what we call endpoint protection, which means that you have software on your desktop, on your mobile phone that actually is doing a constant scan and making sure that viruses and intruders aren't getting access to your system. So they kind of have combinations. Their endpoint includes firewalls as well as the antivirus and data breach type protections. And I'm saying that's older only because some of the newer tools that are looking at our artificial intelligence, and being able to really sort of detect. Um, I want to say maybe in the last probably 4 or 5 years, there have been more tools that can come and actually look at your behavioral patterns and then be able to detect whether or not there's something happening outside of that pattern and be able to stop it. So this is going, I would say, sort of like a next generation beyond someone going in and saying, "Oh, we've said this is a virus and this virus acts this way, and therefore we've got a service where we keep up with all those different definitions and scan your machine and make sure you're safe." Now it's more along the lines of, okay, you have these sets of patterns, and this is how um, we are going about protecting you. And so um, there's some tools that we work with on that side, which is Dark Trace, on the I would say kind of viral endpoint side. We work with Bitdefender, and that's on the, I would say, pure technology end of it. If they're looking to do kind of a combination of all of those and be able to get, what's happening with their systems as well as governance, they can come to us for our core cyber platform. We actually kind of walk them through that whole process, and be able to help do detection as well as the policies.
Okay, great. So I'm going to open up some questions. Just open up if the audience has any questions. You can put it in the chat, or if you'd like to speak, I can allow you to speak directly. Let me just look at the. So once again, does anyone in the audience, do you have any questions or comments for Danietta? Okay, so we're not seeing anything. No.
Okay.
Okay, that's okay. Because
So while you were out,
right.
due to the technology, you're talking about
Right.
technology, and technology gave you practical
Right.
insight. So I heard, I was thinking about the preparation and the what you had discussed about when I say preparation, the hurricane,
Yeah.
right? And how you can prepare and all. And I mean, we always do that. With the global organization that I worked with, we're always preparing our staff and employees on things to do and all, especially because I was in the healthcare industry. There's no downtime for that. There's no time for downtime.
Correct.
So I was thinking about that from that perspective, and I'm thinking, have we assessed based on Melissa last year how prepared organizations are to what we say in Jamaica, wheel and come again in the event of a catastrophe like that
Right.
again.
But so I'll take that on. It's
Yes,
interesting because I just completed as a director for a conference we had in Jamaica over the past 3 days. And the approach we took, the organization it's an organization development,
yes,
that's what we
yes,
do
yes.
training, interestingly enough. But for this year's conference, we decided to focus on post-Melissa issues, disaster recovery,
Excellent,
resilience,
excellent.
and
Right.
sustainability. So we had representatives obviously from at the higher level from government and also private sector. So, the term is used, a conversation is we're having that conversation because Melissa was so, as I said, we've been having the storms,
Devastating.
but this category 5, it was catastrophic. As a
Right,
matter of
right,
fact, I think, I've heard some things recently that it was more a 6. You know what I
right,
mean?
right. Yes, yes.
Right. But what happened, it impacted more the western side of the country, which is
Right,
a touristy side.
right,
And, God willing, not the corporate, business
right,
side,
right, right,
industrial
right.
side of Jamaica directly. But obviously, companies are across the regions. They have branches, they have
Mhm.
staff. You have staff that drive from, so everybody was affected. So yes, they are looking at it for organizations. The approach is different in terms of looking at the solutions that are necessary within organizations. I can't speak to anything
Right,
specific
right, right.
because, yeah. But yes, at least that has started because things
Mm-hmm.
had to shift for
Mm-hmm.
organizations in terms of the approach. And of course, technology. They have been using, fortunately, we had Starlink, as Starlink was introduced just before
Mhm.
the hurricane actually hit. So fortunately, we do have Starlink here, and that was very helpful in, mobilizing teams, not the,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
the telecoms did not go down
Mm-hmm.
as they would, or when they went down, there
Mhm.
was another option to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
communicate. And of course, a lot of people, we use WhatsApp a lot.
Right,
We do,
right, right.
you
I think
know,
it's become now the primary,
the
not only
primary
use.
thing, you know what I mean? So the one of the things they said is that
Mhm.
they had to analyze the larger companies like, we have ODPEM, don't quite right, but the disaster relief
Mhm.
organization, they relied a lot on personal people posting to social media, for example, to find out what was going on in areas.
Yes.
Whereas before it was just their team
Right, right,
doing the
right,
Mhm.
thing.
right.
They were now, so that's how the community actually spread using the technology. So that was a real
You
advantage
know, I'm thinking,
for
Charmaine,
us.
that maybe we need to do some media training
I
because
think
every
for
Tom,
real,
Dick, and
because
Harry
we are
was
getting this.
on and
Yes,
I'm here and I'm doing
yes,
it.
yes.
I'm in
This
Florida
is
and
a
I was kept informed by
yes.
what the posting
Yeah,
they had. Oh,
yeah. So
Right. And
that
but that's the
really was
critical
helpful.
piece. That, you're
Yeah,
speaking
it
to
was
the
a
critical piece. You have to
critical.
think about all of that prior, because sometimes that is all that's going to be available is
I think the
Facebook.
proliferation also of the wanna say bad words because
Yeah,
there
Mhm.
was a media, I'm sure you saw that news reporter in England,
Mhm. Yeah.
right in
Mhm.
the UK, and the person cursed a bad word and was like out, and oh my God, that
oh, yeah,
replicated right across
Mhm.
yeah, it
worldwide. So
does.
everybody is sharing that word
Yeah.
Right.
because all they had was to get that information
Mhm.
from the grassroots people. And it
Yeah,
wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily the best one, but it was
yeah,
a
yeah,
joke when
Gotcha.
everybody
yeah.
found out.
But yeah,
Hilarious what it meant.
Yeah.
there is that. But as I said, there's
Mhm.
also the technology has
Definitely.
really been there are benefits. I mean,
Yes.
as I said, there are things we're talking about. We're talking about the risks, yes, but we have, especially since COVID, fortunately, we are able to connect in a
Right,
way. So we
right.
have to embrace the positive side of what the technology can
Absolutely.
Of
provide.
course. That was actually a positive. It's just that
Yes.
because the media
Yeah.
didn't know and understand the culture,
Yeah.
that's why
Yes.
it proliferated so
Okay.
much. But that
Yes.
All
was good
over,
because,
yeah.
as I said, for me personally, not being on the ground, was able
Right.
Mhm.
to learn more about what was
Right.
happening there.
Right.
But
And
thank
if
you.
I right, and if I put it in the context of
Mhm.
you know the Caribbean is an interesting place because we're so much alike and yet we're so different because you know we don't tra
Yeah.
we travel more to the States and than we do in the Caribbean region.
Oh, really?
But that's
Okay.
another thing that I found where technology has helped us because we are now exposed to what goes on in each island, you know, when
Right,
before, you know, you'd actually have to
right,
fly there before you even,
right,
you know.
right,
No,
right,
Mhm.
so we're more connected regionally as
right.
well through the
Mhm.
top technology.
Technology. And
Fourth
if I
is,
can just also mention
yeah.
to you, Charmaine, that it's so we've advanced so much in the Caribbean that if we're doing the 30 under 30, the people were asking if we could just easily call. Can I just speak with, for example, Bradley, who is the co-chair, and just
Mhm.
call him and just speak with him? Guess what? He's actually in Guyana. So the
Right.
people in the United States were asking, can I just speak with the co-chair?
Yeah.
And then I said,
Yeah.
actually,
And
yes,
not
you can,
realize
but
that
there
you
is,
would.
but it is so you don't know the difference. So I don't know
Right.
lines anymore with
Yeah.
dealing with these. It's the 30 under 30 that Donata.
Right.
It is the
Okay.
30 under 30, those ones that you were talking about, the
Yes, the Gen Zs.
Gen
Yeah.
Zs,
Gen
exactly.
Z's,
So
right,
it is there's
right.
a lot happening. And I think there's a
Yes.
question in your chat.
Okay. There we go. All right. Technology in education delivery. Well, I'm glad. I know we have about really roughly about 3 more minutes, and I think that's an
Mhm.
excellent thing to come up because
Yes.
you know our generation, yes, we grew up with books. Our parents would
Mhm.
say they grew up with a slate, you know, we don't even know what that is, but so it has changed, technology has changed, right? But we grew up, our learning all came from books. Now our learning, the younger generation, is coming from the mobile phone and tablets.
Yeah.
So the question, it's a very broad thing, technology and education, but what are some of the things that we should be paying attention to as parents and as educators ourselves or trainers in
Mhm.
terms of the use of AI, you know, today
And
in from an
technology.
educational standpoint? Yes.
Yeah, I think so it's a double-edged sword, like we were just discussing. So I'm going to start with the positive side of it. Especially for our young people, they can get information from around the world in a matter of seconds.
Mhm.
If they learn how to ask the right prompt, I think many institutions are actually moving to unfortunately get rid of teachers in place of being able to have more artificial intelligence. I know that here in the States, I think we have a school that's going to start in Chicago this fall that is going to be all AI, and they're going to have mentors who show up to basically help the students with their lessons. And instead of a traditional, I think, 6 hour, 6 to 8 hour school day, they're going to reduce it down to 4 hours because they recognize that with the ability to get to the information, each student can move at their own level, right? They don't have to be necessarily tied to the instructional needs of the entire classroom. Each individual student can move as fast or as slow as they need based on the lesson.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's sort of a bit of a mixed bag. I would say for parents, just understand and test your child directly because not all methodologies work for all students. Some kids might actually still need a book and they might thrive better with the teacher.
Mhm.
While other students, the minute they're able to learn on their own and prompt their teacher through a technology console, they'll probably fly. So it
Mhm.
just, I think it's very important for parents to really be probably more involved, I think, than ever, which is probably not something all of them want to hear, but you really have to understand what your child is learning. And also, it gets back to the earlier part of our discussion. While you can get all the information of, okay, what did Einstein think? What did, you can pull up a speech on Martin Luther King and get his perspective and his papers, and you can get to so much knowledge and information. The other flip side of it is that it all depends on how that information is fed into AI and how it then regurgitates that information back to the student. And so
Right.
you have to be very cautious because some things, there's different versions of history, right? There's people who thought that slavery was a positive thing, right? So, your child, you may not think that yourself, and you may not want your child to think that either. So it's just going to be more, I think, more work on the parents, but I think it's a positive
Yeah.
thing overall, right? You're going to get that information. You just have to be very cognizant of what's being taught, how it's
Yeah.
being taught, and, having that lines of communication open so that you understand how information is being presented and what they're receiving.
Right. One of the things I remember a few years ago, there was a lot of talk about project-based learning. I'm not sure how it has
Hmm.
evolved or how it has grown in the
Hmm.
US, but I think that probably is a good design whereas instead of a teacher standing up and just
Hmm.
talking to the students, they work in groups and develop something. And then the learning homework is more,
Yes,
doing the research and the reinforcement, as you said, by parents and so on. But you
right,
go back to building on something specific. And as I
right.
say, it can be, you could be saying you're building, if you're building a house, even though it may seem like,
Hmm.
because skills, we're talking about skills
Skills
coming back of the
development
physical
over,
skills
yes,
development
over
are
just
coming
plain
back
learning. Yeah. Hmm.
because the technology, while it's embedded,
Hmm.
we are humans. We have the growth comes from designing and doing something physical.
Right.
So I see that really the direction of how education will go, in
Hmm.
that we will actually be developing some more practical things. Yes, we have
Yes.
technology and AI or to
Hmm.
support, but you have some results, physical
Hmm.
results that you can take to a next, that's a whole other thing about
Absolutely.
commercialization and so on. But at least
Well,
models would be
hmm,
developed at an earlier stage in life, and so people can appreciate,
right.
you know
Well, going
uh
to that school I was just sharing, that is sort of how they're developing it. So the
okay,
students are coming in and they're actually training them to be entrepreneurs. And so
okay.
for some of the schools, what they're doing is saying, within, I don't know, 18 months, your child will be able to have a functioning business
Right.
and be able to start earning revenue. And so that model is changing. And so there is a lot more, and I think it started probably more so around the time of COVID,
Hmm.
where people started creating these pods.
Right.
And you have learning pods, and it's not necessarily your child going into a traditional K through 12. They're going into this pod, and this pod might be students who are interested in the medical field or students who are interested in technology. And then within that pod,
Right.
they're coming up and doing project-based learning. They're still getting I would say the basics, so to speak, but
Mhm.
then they're being highly specialized at a very early age, which I think is a very encouraging thing.
Right. Yes.
And we don't have students coming out now. My heart goes out sometimes to some of our college students because they're coming out and the whole world has shifted on them,
Mhm.
and they're trying to go back and figure out, well, how do I now get specialized skills, or how do I become an entrepreneur, now that I've got a degree in humanities, right? How do I pivot that knowledge and that information into a new realm? So I definitely see that as a positive piece, and I know that some of the colleges are feeling the pinch here, because you do have more skills-based training that's coming to the forefront. And when you sit down and you say, do I spend $100,000 on a degree and I might get a job, or do I spend 5 to 10 and I can guarantee that I'm going to come out with a skill? You
Hmm.
know, it's
Right.
almost a bit of a no-brainer for
Yeah,
people now,
exactly.
in terms of how education, but it's evolving extremely fast.
Right.
This is probably a field to get into, to be honest, because I think what it means to be educated is also being redefined
Right.
right now. Mhm.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, so wow, this was a wonderful session. I hope the audience really enjoyed it too. We started out by, just reinforcing, Daniel, to reinforce that AI is artificial. I just love that. I hadn't heard it before, and I think it's
Yeah.
something we really need to use. It
Right.
is artificial. So,
Yes.
we're to see it as a tool as
Hmm.
opposed to a replacement. That's a key.
Absolutely.
It is supporting it. It enhances what we do, but not to be totally dependent on it. And to also look at, we talked about the policy and the governance issues and looking at cross-border issues. That obviously would
Hmm.
be something that's developing, and we certainly will be having probably more sessions later on this year on some of those topical issues that affects particularly the Caribbean region. So look out, ICS will be out there. Dr. Nelson, I also want to say Dr. Nelson couldn't be with us today, but there definitely will be other sessions where she's involved as a futurist and talking about, how we look at and, take us to the future and bringing us back, which is her expertise in this
Absolutely.
age of AI. Daniel, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this session. I believe tomorrow there's one more session for the MSME Forum, and we hope that you join us. Thank you, Dr. Shelley, for
Thank
being
you for
there
having
and
me.
for the previous participants in the health section as well. All right, and
My
you can
absolute pleasure. Thank you.
join us on Facebook with National Caribbean American Heritage Month. Our handle is Carib Month. If you go to our Facebook page or LinkedIn page, you will see this is actually streamed live. So you can rewatch this session on Facebook, on the ICS page, as well as the National Caribbean American Heritage Month page. So thank you, everyone, for attending and take
Hey,
care.
thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.